All right. Well, first and foremost, two fans, one Paul, me and Kirk Brown here, Michigan State podcast. Something that I've wanted to do for a while. Big football guy. Love talking shit to Michigan fans. I'm a State guy. Kirk's a Michigan guy. We're just gonna
Yep.
just have a little chat, go from there. First one, so it might be good and bad here and there. But Kirk and I will just talk about some crazy stuff. The season's 2 weeks, 3 weeks away, and I'll let him kind of go from here.
Yeah, so it's basically we're not coming at this from an analytics standpoint or like a high thinking. We're not breaking down film. It's more of a fan interaction where you have two fan bases, live in the same state, have a lot of the same friends and neighbors, and it's just breaking down our expectations for the season, our expectations of the position groups, and then throughout the season, we're planning on doing like game reviews and then game previews as well on again, fan opinions. Like we're not going to be insiders or anything like that. I mean, we watch the games. Dave has season tickets for MSU, so he'll go to
Yes.
a lot of the games. So it's more about just looking at that. So Dave, if you want to kind of start off, we're going to be looking at MSU's offense. Maybe we do quarterback, running back group, and then we'll bounce to Michigan and kind of bounce back and forth. And then
Yeah, I think
if you don't mind,
every
if I have
other.
questions, I'll ask.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
think
can go
every
every
other's
other.
good. I got O line first. And we were kind of talking before. We started 1 through 5. For me, 1 being our best group, most confident. 5 being I have no clue, could be a disaster. And I have O line 1. We're deep. We got like 20 guys plus actually like practicing. I think a couple years ago we had like 6 or 7, so that's huge. Couple good transfers. I think Black. I was looking up at the roster. He's from a JUCO. Where's his name? I know we got Spencer Brown. I'm not seeing him on the roster right now, but
What position does Brown play? Just like
right
any
tackle.
tack. Okay.
I know we got Samac Duplain, a lot of names. We got a guy from JUCO. I can't remember his name, but he's supposed to be really good. He might take over Spencer Brown at right tackle, which would be kind of nuts for a JUCO coming in. But he's supposed to be really solid. And you know, you win or lose in the trenches, and we need our line to be good. If the line's not good this year, I think the line coach is probably gone personally. And I think they'll be their run game wasn't that good last year, and then O line needs to make some holes and protect whoever's starting at quarterback. So I think it's super important, and I think we're as deep as we can be and have been in the last 3 or 4 years. So I think they're obviously my number one. Probably the same
You're
for
number
Michigan.
one. So
Probably the
that
same for
that'll be
Michigan.
the identity. Actually, I have a different number one.
Ooh.
But my O line, I put them at number two. So basically, like our ranking isn't like one, two, three, four, five. Like it's kind of subjective. So the idea was like number one's your team's identity. Number two is like your stability group. So they're going to
Mm.
be above average, but maybe they don't have the ceiling of like what your core is. So I put our O line at two. There was three transfers that came in. Two from Stanford. One of them is a shoe-in starter for center. His name is Drake Nugent. He was an All Pac-12 player, I think, back-to-back years. The other one is Ladarius Henderson, transfer from ASU. He's a left tackle. Michigan lost both their center Oluwatimi to the draft and Trevor and Ryan Hayes, who is their left tackle. So they're bringing in transfers. Same type of deal as MSU. They're a deep group. There's 10 guys that they say could play at most other Big Ten schools. They have some good depth. There's basically one battle going on. Both guards are returning. That's Carson Barnhart versus Miles Hinton and Trente Jones. Carson Barnhart and Trente Jones played a lot against each other last year, and kind of subbed in, especially with injuries. And then Miles Hinton is the other Stanford transfer. He's huge. He's like 7, like 350. And you know how Michigan likes running the ball, but there's no
Yes.
really first round talent at this position. A lot of day two picks, but they don't really have the upside of some of the other positions that Michigan has on offense. I mean, obviously you live and die in the trenches, but I just
Yes.
don't think this group is necessarily going to be the deal breaker to move a team to more or less wins. They'll get the job done. They probably won't win the best lineman of the year award again, but we expect them to be good.
So a
So
slight step
they're
down from last year.
yeah, whenever you have potentially three new starting offensive linemen,
Of course.
you're going to expect some turbulence. Now, cupcake schedule makes it easy at the start of the year to figure that out. But I expect a lot of good, but they just don't have the wow players that maybe you would think of. Like
Yeah.
maybe maybe Zach Zinter, he might get into the first round, but he's a guard, so guards aren't really as valued as tackles. So
Yeah, and that transfer, I can remember his name is Keyshawn Blackstock. He was in a different position on this depth chart I'm looking at, but he's supposed to be solid.
Okay,
Um,
nice.
I'll go to my two, and I think our identity is probably I guess O line and running game for me could be back and forth, probably similar to Michigan, but I think the running backs are huge for two for me. So our O line's going to be number one for sure, and then two is going to be like we need them. For me, the running backs are huge. We got Berger from Wisconsin. His second year, he was okay. He was kind of slow in the middle of the season. Towards the end, he kind of had a good game or two against Wisconsin. And then we got Nathan Carter, guys 5'9", 190, squatting 600 pounds. I'm a gym rat. I love
Yeah.
seeing that kind of stuff. I don't think he'll be, obviously, Kenneth Walker's a legend, but I don't think he'll be as good as Kenneth Walker, but I can see him having flashes and being really good. And then we
Yeah.
got
He
Mangum.
was on a really bad Connecticut team last year, right?
Yeah, he
He
played
was there
four
like
games, he had a shoulder injury, so
okay, yeah, because he played against Michigan last year, so I remember that name.
okay, yeah, he's built. And then we have Mangum who transferred he was at Colorado with Tucker, then he transferred to South Florida, then transferred back up. His brother plays defense. He's like the big guy. He'll be the third down back. So he's like 6'3", 220. And we got a couple of young guys. I last year remember during camp I heard a name Davian Pim. He's like from Oak Park. I don't know if he'll ever play or prim, but like I think we have the talent, and I think obviously three running backs is really good. If they all getting good touches and are getting 3 or 4 yards a carry, that's good. Obviously, after Kenneth Walker, it's hard to live up to that hype because he's just next level. So hopefully they can figure it out this year, and the O line and the running backs kind of get it going. It'll be easier on the whoever's quarterback.
Are there concerns as a MSU fan that Tucker hasn't established like a running back in the program?
He,
I obviously a lot of COVID stuff recruiting's been kind of wacky, but just like
yeah.
they don't even have like a true
We don't
starter
have
that
like a
he
Javon Ringer. We
develops.
don't have like a Le'Veon Bell that we've.
Yeah, is that
Um,
like a concern, or like are you like looking
mm,
at the future recruits and not worried about it? And like obviously Kenneth Walker worked out, but like
I'd say
what
yeah,
are your thoughts on that?
a little bit of yes and no. It's nice to get like a guy like Nathan Carter out of the portal or like Kenneth Walker out of the portal. But yeah, I think and Mangum's a transfer too. All of our running backs are transfers, so it is tough. It'd be nice to see like Prim. Let me look at the depth chart. I know he's been there for a couple of years. I mean, Jordan Simmons has been there forever. He was our starter in 2019. He's not as shifty. He's just kind of hit the hole and go. So it's a little worrisome, but I think the portal is today's game, and you got to use the guys you got. And I think Berger and Carter will, like our top three running backs, all transfer, so I think we'll be fine. But good question. I wish we had a guy that kind of rises up. I guess we'll see. We do have a young kid too from Cali. I don't know if he'll play much, but he's a freshman and he came in late, so I doubt he plays much. But you never know. If
Yeah,
you're a stud, you'll get in.
yeah, especially at the running back position. So for Michigan, RB is our number one.
Yeah.
Um, it's how this team's gonna kind of look. It's who they are as a team is more their running back position. They've relied on their running backs a lot. They kind of wore them into the ground last year. Blake Corum had 247 carries through 10 games and a half, and he wasn't playing a lot in the early on in the season. He was getting 10, 15 carries a piece. So I know he had like a 30 plus carry game a few times coming off a big knee surgery. So that's another thing where like he's coming off a knee surgery. Donovan Edwards, who's arguably might get drafted higher, even though he's been his backup for the most of the time, just because what he can do out of the receiving portion of the field
Yep.
in the backfield. But he had a knee scope, or no, he had a patella tendon tear, and he also had a broken thumb down the stretch last year. So if these guys can stay healthy, I mean, you have two between first and second day selections. You have two explosive running backs that can take over the game. Obviously, they need holes to run through their O line, but those two are definitely the front runners. And I'm not even looking at like one is the starter, one isn't the starter. They'll probably both get about 15 touches a game if they're healthy. Donovan Edwards has not been able to be healthy for the last 2 years, and down the stretch the last 2 years, Corum's been injured. Behind them, it's kind of a toss up. So you have Cleo Mullings, who was a former linebacker that got reps down the stretch last year because he's like 6'2", 235. He's a short yardage guy. He had the fumble on like the 1 yard line against TCU. That was who they were giving the ball to. CJ Stokes is a sophomore. He got a lot of carries last year as a freshman. They weren't particularly deep. And then there's two freshmen. One's Benjamin Hall, another really stout guy, and then Cole Cabana. He's a Michigan guy from the state. He's
He sounds familiar.
skinny, skinny white kid.
Where's he
You
from?
probably seen. I can't remember
I
what
think we were
school.
trying to get him too.
Yeah,
Um,
he
I'll look him up.
let's Yeah, but Cole Cabana, he might have some reps, especially if people get injured. He was an early enrollee, added about 18 pounds
Dexter.
over the summer. Dexter,
Yep.
that's what I thought. I couldn't pull the trigger on it though, but so he's also possible gadget player out of the backfield. So
Was Mullins
really,
lined up as a fullback for the TCU game? Sorry to interrupt you.
yeah,
That's what I thought. Yep, yeah.
it was that's just a stupid play call. Putting a linebacker, he'd only been playing the position for about a month, and they put him, short-sided fullback instead of just giving him a normal carry on first down. But
Right, right.
this is going to be the heart and soul of the team. If those two come back and are healthy throughout the year, I mean, they're gonna be used, and they're gonna
Would you
be
say
dominant most
both over
likely.
1,000, both over 10 rushing touchdowns? Easy.
I wouldn't say easy. Over 1,000 yards, I would almost guarantee they almost did it last year, and neither of them played basically
Right.
a
All
lot of the
12.
games. I think 10 combined touchdowns. I think you're going to see Edwards um, running out of the slot a little bit more, both of them on the field a little bit more if they're both healthy. He's just dominant, catching the ball and running routes. A few games, he literally lined up at receiver and was running 10-yard in routes and stuff like that. So you'll probably see 10 total. It's going to be just a dominant group, and that's why I ranked them as the number one. They're the identity of this team. So
Absolutely. What was your definition for three again? For the next one?
three is kind of like I'll double check, but it's like baseline average. Like you're not expecting this team, yeah, like you're not expecting this group to ever separate themselves. It's
Hmm.
kind of what you have. They're baseline. They're about as average as you can get.
And then what's four again?
Four is you think there's a huge upside, but you don't know. So it's kind
Okay,
of
yeah.
like
Perfect.
unsubstantiated good. So if you're like, oh, this group could have a below average year, but they have the possibility of being, nuclear. You just
Yep.
don't know yet. Versus like, hey, I know this group is average, and it's okay that they're average, but they're not gonna, you know, go
Perfect.
to that next level.
All right,
So
then
your
my
next group,
rankings are perfect. Three's tight ends. I think tight ends and receivers here are definitely going to be close. I think both could go off this year, but I'm going to say just three for tight ends because they could be steady. Malik Carr is just a freak. I mean, big guy, doesn't wear gloves. I wish he did sometimes because sometimes he has too many drops. We have him, transfer from Norfolk State. I don't even know how to say the guy's name. He's like 6'7". These are guys you just got to throw the ball to them in the red zone. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't. They should each have a couple touchdowns, no problem. Safety blankets, run a little seam up the middle, like we were talking earlier, as a safety blanket. And the other one's like an out or a little in or a hitch. These are guys that are going to be there and they're going to block too. They're big bodies, 6'5", 6'7", 250 plus, and they're pretty athletic. And we got a couple younger guys too that might be able to step in, but I think Malik Carr and what's his name? He's not even on the top four. But I can't remember his name. He's from Norfolk State. He's a big body, but I think obviously Malik Carr's the guy because he was going to play. He was playing basketball at Purdue, and he transferred up here to play both, and now he's just playing football. I think he could easily be a second round or second day draft as well next season. So I think they'll be steady, and we need to use them better. That's kind of on coaching. So I'm hoping that Malik Carr and the other guys that are backups get some more touches because they could easily be a safety blanket for Hauser or Kim, whoever
are
starts.
you returning the same offensive coordinator?
Everybody stayed.
Everybody stayed. All the secondary staff
J,
stayed.
I think so. I think one guy, Ephraim Reed, he was a running back coach. He left and then he came back.
And then your D line coach left though, right? The or the player coach.
The
He
D
was, I
line
believe.
coach, I think, was from a. There wasn't a lot of coaching changes that I can remember. I think the D line coach joined in
Okay,
January. I was reading stuff today at work.
nice. And so they aren't like used much in that offensive scheme, right? Even though they block a
No, they
lot. I
should, and
mean,
they
they're
run a
in a
pro.
lot,
They
block
run
a
a pro
lot.
style. They should. I mean, I think he only had 200 or 300 yards and a couple touchdowns, and he went off against Purdue. Um, in my opinion, they got to be used as a little. I never really like him when I'm watching a game in person, like a tight end screen. I hate that, but or a little in or a seam, just like something that's gonna be open for 5 yards, 8 yards on a third and six.
Especially with like the big question mark at receiver for you guys with
Yeah,
lack of returning production. Really get those guys those reps.
Malik Carr should be the like. If I'm Kim or Hauser, I'm thinking Trey Mosley probably is a number one receiver, and then I'm thinking Malik Carr. Like those are my two guys. You have to look for them, and they're both I think Malik Carr is 6'5", so like I don't know how you don't look for him.
Gotcha. No, I love that. So moving on to Michigan's tight ends. So I doubled up at number two here. Um, I didn't really have any position group on offense that I was like number five. I'm scared of, and I needed to kind of figure out where to put this group. And it's number two. So AJ Barner is an Indiana transfer, big body, been in the Big Ten for years, and then you have Colston Loveland, um, who was a freshman last year. He's from Idaho. Um, he had a really big movement down the stretch because Michigan had a bevy of injuries at tight end. Schoonmaker, who's in the NFL, he had a shoulder injury for a while. I don't know if it was labrum, but I know he had to get off-season surgery before draft time for it. And then obviously Eric All, who left the program and is now at Iowa. So the fun story about him is it sounds like he had a very serious back injury that Michigan and their staff were telling him to play through. Um, when it came down to it, he was in a lot of pain, wanted to get surgery, and Michigan wouldn't approve it. So he had to leave the program
Mm.
to go get the surgery down in Florida, it sounds like, from what I'm reading. I don't know what the Michigan staff was telling him, but that's kind of the wisp that I got out of it. But obviously, losing both of those guys is pretty big. But you're returning two guys who've proven production. Colson Loveland had a great time down the stretch. He needs to develop more as a blocker. He added a bunch of weight in the offseason because Michigan uses tight ends. You know, they're Jim Harbaugh's gospel. He
Yep.
wants them in every single play. He wants three tight ends. He needs as many people down the line as he can. I expect a pretty good season. Loveland had 235 yards last year in basically 4 games of being a starter in a starter role. So I expect him to be up there and used a lot in the same Schoonmaker role. They threw jump balls to him last year, one-on-ones down the stretch, so I kind of expect them to use him in even a bigger way this year. But that group's going to be solid. Not any concerns with Michigan and tight ends really ever. I mean, they're going to
Always
produce a
solid.
third round, fourth round pick out of tight end
Yep.
basically every 2 or 3 years. So
And All was Cade's roommate, correct? Like they're pretty
yeah,
close. Okay.
all and Cade were pretty close. It wasn't because of that. From what I read, is that they were talking about medically retiring Eric All
Oh wow.
from football, which is a whole big thing, obviously. And he was basically like, "Yeah, no, I'm not doing that." He had just recently had a kid, and he's like, "I need to take care of my kid. I'm getting this surgery. If
Hmm.
it goes well, then I can keep playing. If not, then whatever have you." But sounds like he recovered fully. He's out running at Iowa, and all the best to him. He has really good hands. He's big mover. He can block. So all the best to him. And same with Cade when at Iowa we start talking about QBs. So what I want to know your wide receivers. That's what I want to know about.
They're definitely my four. I mean, I think we were talking earlier today, and I was listening to a podcast and doing a little research. Obviously, the one guy that he's gonna wear zero. I don't know how I feel about that. Coleman was zero. He's at Florida State, and that stings a
For
little bit.
Coleman, man, he left you guys to burn. He's like,
I
oh, I knew
think
I was gonna go up north, learn how to play football, and then
it's a
what
bummer.
did
I
he
mean,
do?
he's a younger kid. I get it to a point, and him and Jimmy Bernard, that hurts because those are both NFL receivers. Coleman's a
Yeah,
big guy.
they're
He's quick.
dogs.
Bernard was originally going to go to Washington. Then something happened with his NIL deal, went away, came to us. Didn't get a lot of play. He didn't play a bunch, but he got some plays, had a couple tutties. Then he went back to Washington, and they smacked us last year. I was there, so it'd be interesting to see how. I kind of want to look for him when he's on the field with us because obviously he's probably boys with half the team. But Bernard and Coleman gone. That's huge. Those were probably our 1 and 2. I mean, Trey Mosley's our guy now, Mr. Reliable. He's probably in his fifth or sixth year, honestly, at the team. Um, I remember one game distinctively was with Kenneth Walker against Miami. He was just solid. He had a couple big catches, a couple big runs. I think he can still do that. He's not a burner, but he's going to catch the ball and he's going to get some yak too. But
Is he a slot guy or is he like an outside kind
I
of
would say
distinguished?
outside. He's like 6'3".
Oh,
But
okay, yeah,
but the
outside
transfer
possession
the
guy then.
transfer guy that I think is the guy that needs to take up the top of defense is Alante Brown. He's from Nebraska. I haven't heard too much from him, but it sounds like he's like a 6 foot guy and he's quick and can beat guys on a fly. I think we had our first scrimmage this weekend, probably like most teams, so I didn't hear anything too crazy. But he could be that guy that takes the top off. Tyrell Henry is also kind of that quick, shifty guy as well. Um, but my low key guy that I think is going to be really good, he's a transfer from Louisville. Christian Fitzpatrick, also a big guy, he's like 6'5", hasn't played a lot. He started in a lot of games, but didn't get a lot of catches last year. I think he might be the guy. And then just guys that could come out of nowhere. Antonio Gates Jr. That name sounds familiar. His dad is a goat, goat tight end forever of the
Yeah,
Chargers.
goat goat. He's a
Um,
sophomore this year, right?
Redshirt freshman.
Oh, okay.
So our and then a guy that's kind of always been with the program, not a big guy, nothing crazy, but he's pretty athletic. Montori Foster, he's like 5'10", 5'11". He'll make some catches for you. He's been in the program for a long time too. So I think your 1 and 2 are probably Mosley and Montori Foster, but there's a lot of young guys that could. We just don't know. And Coleman and Bernard leaving is obviously huge. We all know that, and yeah, I think these guys are willing to step up. I'd like to see Fitzpatrick step up. I think that's the guy that I'm looking for, and then Alante Brown. He could be like our burner, kind of like a Jaden Reed type. Um, Jaden Reed wasn't a super burner, but he had that explosion to take a punt return or kick return back. And I think Alante Brown
Yeah.
might have that possession. Even though Reed wasn't a big guy, he had that possession. Maybe Alante Brown similar. I'm not too sure.
Is he
Um,
going to be you guys' returner too?
nope,
Do you
that's
know?
that's Tyrell Henry, number 2. He is
Oh,
the
okay.
third. He's under Trey Mosley, Alante Brown, and then Tyrell
Gotcha.
Henry. So I think we have an X, we have an X, a Z, and an F. So I think F is probably. I'm not sure exactly how that works in our offense because one guy's the slot and then the other guy's on the outside. I'm not too sure how it
Yeah.
works, but yeah, forward for sure. I think who knows? I have no clue, but having a guy like Trey Mosley that's been the we're on the team for 5 or 6 years, leading the guys. Hopefully that gets a little spark, and then hopefully one or two guys kind of pops off. And I don't know who it's going to be, but um, we'll get a quick test against Washington. I think their defense was okay against us last year. They weren't anything special, but Peyton Thorne had a lot of pressure on him and kind of threw a couple balls up to guys. And yeah,
Yeah, Washington's front four is nasty. Like, there's going to be a lot of pressure, and you're going to see if your O line's good at pass protecting. I mean, maybe run blocking, they dominate them, but that's
yeah,
going to be a really, really good test
absolutely
early
agree.
on.
But that's my 4, and I could probably keep talking about it, but we'll have to see.
So, my wide receivers, I put them at three. So I was leaning towards four at one point, and obviously you have a lot of departures. So Andrell Anthony, transfer wide receiver, leaving the program. He's from Lansing originally, went to Oklahoma. So he had a one huge game against Michigan State and wasn't really productive the rest of his time at Michigan. Wish him the best. Obviously, you have AJ Henning, who was our primary kick and punt returner. He's also a slot guy. They talked a lot about using him in a Debo Samuel role, but that never kind of festered through the course of the season. Dropped and just inconsistency. And I don't really know if they gave him a chance to be anything other than like the jet motion guy. He's at Northwestern now, so wishing him the best. And then obviously Michigan's leading receiver on the year, 889 yards, Ronnie Bell. He got drafted. He actually just played tonight for the 49ers. So you do return Cornelius Johnson, who's been in the program since before COVID. He's like a super, super senior at this point. And then Roman Wilson. So those are your definite 1, 2. Roman's going to be your slot guy who has opportunity to be outside because of his speed, but he's pretty slight in stature, a little bit smaller. Cornelius Johnson is your prototypical X receiver, 6'2", 6'3", long strider, runs a lot of goes and deep posts and stuff like that. The returning between the two of them, Cornelius almost had 500 yards. Roman Wilson had almost 400. So you kind of have this blanket of protection where you know what these guys can do. You know that they're going to put up decent numbers, but you just don't know kind of what's beyond them. So if I had to kind of like rank um, how confident I am, I'd say it's middle of the pack, which is why they end up at three. Um, Everyone every offseason talks about Michigan's wide receiver room in Big Ten media spaces. I don't know if you hear it a lot, but Michigan, they always say, oh, this is the year for a 1,000-yard receiver. This is the year to break the drought. Jim Harbaugh hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiver in his career as a college football head coach. It's not going to start at Michigan.
Did he have anybody at
He had
Stanford?
Andrew
Did he
Luck.
have anybody?
No, no.
I
He had
can't think of
Andrew
anybody.
Luck. Um, he's on the
Did he have? He had that tight end with Andrew Luck, right? That's like the.
yeah, he had like 600, 700 yards, and then they had the guy that was in Seattle for a long time, Baldwin maybe.
Oh
He
yeah,
had like
Doug Baldwin.
eight. Yeah, Doug Baldwin was there at Stanford, and they didn't even get to 1,000 yards. So he's not going to have a 1,000-yard receiver. He doesn't draw off his offense. He doesn't scheme
No.
plays to ride a hot hand. They
Who's your
just run their
biggest?
offense.
Who's your like? Do you have any size? Like, who's your biggest guy?
Yeah, so Cornelius Johnson, 6'2".
Okay.
He's a jumper. He can win some jump balls. Then you have the group below them. So those are your obvious 1-2s.
Yeah.
And then you have Darius Clemens, who's a true sophomore. He's 6'3", 6'4", like in that size. He's huge. He has some speed. He has a chance to kind of push Cornelius Johnson. Then you have two guys or three guys below him that I want to mention. You have Christian Dixon, who's 6'2" as well, kind of also vying for that other outside spot. He's a redshirt sophomore. Then you have Tyler Morris, who's going to be a redshirt freshman. He was actually teammates with JJ McCarthy at Nazareth Academy in Illinois, so you kind of have a connection there. He's also a slot guy, so him and Roman might be on the field at the same time, but they're going to be working. I think he's 6 foot even. And then you have Peyton O'Leary, who's a 6'3" former walk on. I think he's earned a scholarship at this point, but
Nice.
he's a big bodied guy who's done really well the last two springs that you just don't know what his athletic ability upside is. But this is going to be mediocre group. They're going to kind of put one thing after another, catch passes, and kind of block. That's really a focus on Jim Harbaugh's offense is guys who block. So that's kind of what it is at this point, and kind of who the identity of these guys are. And I'm not expecting anything special of them. I expect them to kind of do what it is. I mean, I watch Michigan games. If any of you guys are huge Big Ten fans, go to Big Ten on YouTube and go to the games in 60. You can watch a full game, every single snap, watch all the plays in less than an hour. It's absolutely wonderful. And you watch, and Michigan doesn't win contested catches. They don't really have a lot of yak ability, and the receiving core. They don't challenge things, especially well. They don't track the ball well, and that's just like who the group is. It's who they've kind of always been under Jim Harbaugh. So I'm not expecting anything special.
Fair. Yeah. Obviously, it's run the ball and then tight ends, so it makes sense with your
Pound the
rankings.
ball in tight ends, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, the last one's gonna be quarterbacks, and for you, it looks like. Obviously, you know what you got, but I don't know if I want to do 4 or 5. I have no clue what to think. I think Noah Kim could be the guy. I think Noah Kim is super athletic. His numbers in high school are pretty good, 41 and 2, whatever, bunch of yards. In Virginia, he won a state title. I don't know how good high school football is in Virginia. Peyton Thorne leaving opened the door for him and Hauser. Why did Thorne leave? I heard that the coaches told him, the QB coach and coordinator told him he was going to start, and then Tucker said it's open competition, and then like a day later he put his name in the portal, and then I don't know who else he talked to, but Auburn was the one. He might not even start in Auburn, at Auburn.
Yeah, it's wild. I just saw that too. Like
Yeah, I don't.
transfers from a competition and loses a competition
Do I
isn't
think?
really like a confidence booster.
Yeah, do I think Peyton Thorne's a bad quarterback? No. Do I think he's good? Yeah. He's not gonna make your team better. He's just gonna do the job. When we had Kenneth Walker, all he had to do was run a couple play action plays. Oh, there's Zoe, and
Chicago.
uh, Kenneth Walker would make people take 2 steps in. I mean, he's just that good. He's an NFL running back, and that made Jaden Reed or Keon Coleman go deep a lot. So I wish him luck. I mean, he got a nice little truck out of the deal and probably some cash, and I think college kids should get paid. So W on them. Um, but in my opinion, if I'm him, I already beat out Anthony Russo 2 years ago. I'm gonna do it again. So I don't know what that is. Maybe he was just pissed off at Tucker. I don't know. I'm not a college quarterback. It's a lot of pressure. So now with Kim and
Yeah.
Hauser, I'd probably get the slight edge to Kim just because he's got more experience on the field. I think Hauser's probably got the better arm talent. He's bigger bodied.
Is
He's
he a
like
true freshman or redshirt
red shirt.
freshman?
He went to St. John Bosco, powerhouse in Cali.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was reading about him today. He split reps with a kid that went somewhere else. Like they both are D1 quarterbacks. Right now I give the slight edge to Kim, but I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the year if Hauser was the guy. He's got the bigger upside, bigger body. They're both athletes. I think they can run a little bit. I think Kim is probably the better runner. Um,
Yeah.
he's like 180 in the Big Ten. If you get hit a couple times, you're gonna get hurt, and I don't want that to happen. I think so. I guess we'll see if they split snaps in the first couple games. We have Central and Richmond. But I do want to throw out our freshman from Oregon. He was a state player of the year in Oregon, Sam Levitt. He was going to go to Washington State, and then we got him kind of late. He came in late. He didn't come in the winter time, so probably won't play because he doesn't have a playbook or anything. But I think he's a 4-star just like Hauser. I mean, State's not always in the top
The,
rankings for recruiting, but they still get decent talent, and I think he might in a couple years. Levitt and Hauser, if they
down the line.
if they're both on the team still in 2 or 3 years, it'd be interesting to see. with the transfer portal and everything these days, who knows? But I think right now I'd edge it to Kim, and I think Hauser and Levitt are probably pushing. They all like the competition. They all are embracing it per usual. Um, but I wouldn't be surprised if you saw them both to start the year, and then maybe Washington, Kim gets the start, and if things aren't going well, Hauser might take the job. But it's a big question mark. I think Thorne would have started, probably would have won, but supposedly he was hurt the whole year last year after the Western game, and you could kind of tell. I don't think he played terrible, but he didn't play great. So we'll see. I mean, we have Central and Richmond to start, and then you got a future Big Ten opponent coming in, Big Ten rival, Washington. Now that
Yeah.
everybody's joining the Big Ten. And I was in Seattle last year, and it was a hell of a time. So hopefully we can get as rowdy as they were. But that'll be the first test, as we all know. And I really don't know. I think I give it to Kim, and we're gonna run the ball, and then hopefully we can throw a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit.
it's gonna be probably a trial period there for Kim. You guys don't really know what to expect. I mean, he hasn't. How many snaps has he
I
even
think
played
last year he
for?
was like 8 for 12, 3 touchdowns, and I'll give one thing I liked when he was in, even though it was against like Akron and backups. He threw the ball down the field every time, and he has had balls. So if he's like that to start every game, and he's just forgetting about a pick or a fumble, and he's just throwing it down the field, and he's making plays, I won't be mad. So if you have some balls to steal and you wanna, sling it around, be my guest. So I do like that about him, what I've seen so far.
Gotcha. Yeah. So for Michigan, I put QB as number 4.
Mm.
So obviously I don't have a huge concern here, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with JJ this year. Last year Michigan ran the ball like 62% of the time, 63 until they got to the postseason. So they're a ground and pound team. They're heavy play action, but what you would like to see is Michigan's quarterbacking records are atrocious. I think the all-time passing touchdowns in a single season is like 28 or 30, and yards is like 3,200 or like right around 3,000. And if JJ has a season where he can put together games and put together throws, he can have that. Now, last year, JJ McCarthy didn't have any spring ball. He didn't have any summer. He couldn't throw for 7 months after the season. He had inflammation in the shoulder, elected not to get surgery and just rehab it naturally, do a lot of strength stuff, and kind of let the inflammation cool down. So he still went out and beat Cade McNamara in a camp, who's a Big Ten championship quarterback. So the upside's there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see where he has a full fall camp getting first team reps because he's splitting first team reps last year. He gets his first game, gets those starts against the Cupcakes to really build momentum, get timing down with receivers. Because a lot of the time last year, it was just inconsistency. Like he made a lot of good decisions. I mean, he completed 64% of his passes, only 5 picks, and 3 of the picks came down in the last 2 games. Obviously, the 2 pick sixes against TCU. But overall, like if you watch the TCU game, it's like that's what an inexperienced guy who wasn't relied on to throw, who has to throw, does. I mean, he had huge upside throws where he was slinging it, and you're like, how can he make that throw? And then other ones where his footwork is bad and uneven, and so it's about getting that consistency for him. And so if he has the season that he's capable of, I mean, he can put up 67, 68% completion percentage and 3,500 yards with 35 touchdowns. That's a very makeable season for him for last year, first year as a starter. And everyone's hyping up Quinn Ewers and what he did at Texas. And JJ had better numbers in the same, in a less dynamic passing scheme than Ewers. And Ewers was injured too, which a lot of people talk about, but they have pretty comparable numbers. JJ's was a little better. If JJ figures it out, gets his feet under him, I mean, he can lead this team to the national championship if possible. But if not, JJ can also put up pretty mediocre numbers. They can possibly win the Big Ten. So it's kind of like, are we going to get average QB play from him or, rocket ship? Because he was a 5-star, maybe he was a 5-star or super high 4-star. I don't know where he ended up falling, but when he was originally getting recruited, he was a 5-star guy. So he has that potential. He's a great athlete. He can run. I expect them to give him more QB runs. They kind of saved him because they didn't have a backup behind him with Cade McNamara out. He only ran in really the TCU game, OSU game, Penn State, and then so it's in also a little bit at MSU. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that all kind of plays out. But he, at his core, can be a very dynamic quarterback, and it's going to be what they allow him to do offensively. Run some more RPOs, run some more dynamic routes, and possibly he could be to the moon, or he has a huge letdown, and you see him next year, as a starter again. So
Is he a junior?
he's a
Redshirt.
junior. Yep, a true junior.
Do you think he goes
So
pro if he has like? I mean, I've heard people say he could be better, like a top quarterback over like Caleb Williams, which I don't know how I feel about that personally.
I wouldn't go there. There are talks. A lot of scouts are super high on him because of the upside he brings,
Yeah.
and so if he capitalizes on that, I mean, he could be a late first round quarterback. He could be like a 20, 25 pick quarterback. I don't think he has the top end to be a 5 through 10 quarterback, in that range just after the immediate first ones. But honestly, like, he has the arm strength, he has the mobility. It's just about getting those reps and proving that he can do all that stuff that he shows. I don't think I'm as high as him as Caleb Williams, but I think he has potential to play like Caleb Williams. Not that he is or can be that consistently, but he has that potential. And also to clarify one thing, a lot of people are shitting on Jim Harbaugh because he's like, oh, I see Patrick Mahomes and you know Josh Allen in him. The quote was about his leadership and what he's willing to sacrifice for his team. The rest of the quote is in how he leads people and what he's willing to do for the team, not in his playing ability. He's not comparing them to him
Yeah.
like that. It was about what he brings to the team. So
Who's the
to
backup?
clarify,
Who's the backup for JJ anyway?
the backup is Jack Tuttle, transfer from Indiana.
Oh,
There's
okay.
2 years Big Ten experience, and then behind him, there's also 3 other guys. Davis Warren, who, terrific story, battled leukemia, missed out his senior year. Michigan honored the scholarship. COVID hit, all sorts of mess going around, but he was the
Cool.
backup to play in blowouts last year. Then you have Alex Orji. Remember RG3's Orji in the end zone. He's like 6'4", great athlete. And then Jaden Denegal is like a 6'3". They're both redshirt freshmen. So I assume we don't see them. You might see maybe some goal line packages with Orgy. They used them a decent bit last year, but it's most likely Jack Tuttle and Davis Warren that'll be battling for that QB2 spot. So,
Got it. Yeah, I think.
and if the guys get injured, I mean, season's screwed anyway. So, I mean, you can't lose your starting quarterback in a Big Ten and figure
Yeah,
it out.
I
You really
mean,
don't have that.
you guys might be screwed, but you still have the running game and the line to win. Like how we beat Ohio
Yeah, you
State
can
that
win
one.
nine
Like how we beat
games.
Ohio State that one year, 14-10, with our bat with Damian Terry and
Yeah,
Tyler O'Connor. So it can be done if you have really good defense. So I think, yeah, JJ's got upside. Do I think he's overrated? Yeah, I've heard a lot about him the last couple years. I won't forget the Kenneth Walker game where they put him in and he fumbled, and he twice. The
he
first
didn't
time he.
fumble. Corum didn't take the
There was
next year.
miscommunication. There was something going on, but he did fumble
Yeah,
the first
Corum didn't
time and he
take the
didn't lose
handoff.
it.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
So
that one for sure was. He's very loose with the ball. He only really runs with the ball in his right hand for whatever reason. I've never seen him really do keeps with his left hand. I don't know the reason why, but that is really weird. He did fumble in that game, and then obviously the Corum miscommunication.
yeah.
But
So I have a trivia question before we go to defense because I just looked it up. People always
okay,
talk about the Michigan State. Michigan, runs the rivalry, but since Michigan State has joined the Big Ten, that'd be 1950. What is the series at? Do you think?
I think MSU's like +3, right?
No,
Or it's like I know it's.
Michigan's in the lead, but it's actually pretty
I was gonna
close.
say it's like let's say 5 or 6 then. Like I know it's
39, yeah,
not.
39, 32, and 2. Michigan's up by 7.
Yeah.
Obviously, we probably got a bunch. We were probably down by almost 20 until the last 15, 20 years. So
Yeah,
we when
after in
after
2008
Rod and
when
Brady. I
Brady.
mean, Rod and Brady Hook was down and we were up, and then Ohio State was also down. So it was just good timing for State to peak. Um, so I just want to throw that out there because
That
everybody
is
always
fun
talks.
trivia.
Everybody talks mad shit about how it's like, oh, this,
Well, you got to call it all the wins, Dave. That's the only way you can do it because we held you out of the Big Ten because you were good enough to be in the Big Ten. The
yeah.
Michigan fandom just they hated that you were joining
And then
because
we
they didn't want
were
any athletes to go there.
And then the 60s were dominant because we were the first team to integrate and so forth. We had 2 natties, and then we were kind of, ups and downs, I think, for both. Obviously, Michigan's a more storied program. But I just like,
Most wins all time. They might reach 1,000. If they get 11 wins this year, they're gonna hit 1,000 wins, which
I
is
mean,
crazy.
some of the
I know
games like in
there's
the early
wins.
1900s are against who?
Yeah, everyone did that.
Everyone
Anyone
did
who's
that.
at the top,
Could
like
play,
you
yeah.
look at Ohio State, that's just who you played. It's just
Yeah,
football was such a new game that that's just who you played. So you either count all of them or last year's. Those are the only games you can really count.
yeah,
Because when you go back any, because you can say, oh well, that was before black people were allowed to play. When everyone, especially in the South, were super racist, and everyone in the North were super racist, and MSU was the first one to integrate, and they
mm,
had a huge skill advantage because of that. And because you have a wider population of people, you're only recruiting these people. It's a huge advantage, and
yeah.
football's 70% black now,
They're
and so that's a
athletes.
huge advantage that they
Yeah,
had to the program. And so like, do you count any of the wins before integration, or
yeah.
do you count the wins where we expanded the Big Ten? Do you count the wins after 2000? Like it's all doesn't matter. So last year slash this year, right? You count who you beat this year, who you
Yep,
beat
yep.
last year, and then it's all time after that. It is fun to look at like 1950 because 7 wins is crazy.
39,
The
32,
difference,
and 2.
over
Yeah.
50. It reminds me of the Duke and UNC rivalry, where they're like over the last like 20 seasons, they've split the rivalry almost the same amount of points, almost the same amount of this. And it's like that's what rivalries are about.
Yeah.
Is back and forth and winning and going on streaks. Like,
From 58 to 68, Michigan only won twice with 2 ties. That's when State was dominant when they integrated.
yeah,
And
when
then
they
Michigan
won
went on a streak, and then
Cincinnati.
a little bit back and forth, Michigan, and then State from 2008 to now has been obviously the more dominant. But obviously that might
Yeah,
change. But I thought I'd throw that out there because we always talk a lot of shit in Michigan about Michigan being uh, like a landslide, but it's actually a lot closer if you want to count when we were both in the Big Ten. So I just want to throw that out there.
right.
And I'm going to start with I'm going to go a little quicker on defense because I'm going to throw linebackers. I'm going to throw all front seven at one because
Oh, okay.
I mean, you can split yours up if you want to do D lineman and edge and linebackers, but Michigan State is known to stop the run. We're getting Cal Holiday back. He was like second in tackles in the Big Ten. Jacoby Windman played DN, but he's going to be back at linebacker, which he played at UNLV. He was just a tackle monster. I don't know what you want to say about him in the altercation in the tunnel. Obviously, that's a whole thing with with both teams here. Um, it shouldn't have happened. It was stupid. Jacoby Windman was part of it. He missed 4 games. I think he was like almost led the country in forced fumbles, and he only played 8 games. Um, he's a monster. I think he's kind of flying under the radar right now. So I think him and Cal Holiday being, I don't know if we're gonna run a 4-2-3, 4-2-5, or a 4-3 yet. I prefer 4-3 to stop the run, but right now Cal Holiday and Windman are my 1 and 2 like by a mile. That's our. You got just generic player one, Cal Holiday, nothing on, doesn't even wear gloves. Um, our D line is super deep with big guys like Simeon Barrow and Derek Harmon. Then you got great names, Maverick Hansen, and then some guy I've heard a lot of talk about in camp is Jalen Sami or Sammy. Was at Colorado with Tucker, and then he just transferred over with Coach Prime. Who knows what's going to happen with them this year? He's a big body. He's super athletic, I guess, for a big guy. So I think our interior guys are going to be stopping the run. And then on the edge, we got Bogle from Florida. And who's the other guy?
Yeah, Chris Bogle, right?
Yep. I think he's got a lot of upside. Behind him is Avery Dunn. He played a lot towards the end. He seems like a pretty athletic white kid. And then on the other side is a transfer from A&M, Tunsum. I don't know how to say his name. Adesai, his
Yeah,
last name is Adelaide. He was a
had to say.
five-star.
Yeah,
Yeah, Adesai. Adelaide. I don't know how to say his name. But he is from A&M, five-star kid. Didn't really do much. But I think he's gonna have a lot of upside. Maybe a change of scenery is good for him, and him and Bogle kind of are SEC guys that can maybe show up in the Big Ten. Behind him is Brandon Wright, who used to be a running back from D'Antonio era and transferred over to the D line. And then I think a kind of a sleeper guy, big recruit out of Oklahoma, by Job. He might be a guy that comes in super young, super athletic, that he goes up and he's rotating in a lot. So I'm just gonna throw our front seven at one. State's been known to stop the run the last few years. We all know no fly zone 10 years ago is pretty much gone. So that'll probably be. I'll talk about that later. But yeah, I just want to throw my front seven out there because Cal Holiday, Windman, and then the line is super deep right now. So I'm kind of looking forward to our defense. Could go back to
yeah.
when we had D'Antonio and we just had a really good defense and we went 6-6 because we couldn't score. Obviously, we have one of the hardest schedules in the country, so I'm looking forward to seeing how our defense stacks up.
So, Wyndham. He was dominating,
Yeah,
but at the start of the season, but he didn't record a Power Five sack last year, if I remember it correctly.
I
And I
wouldn't
know
be
he
surprised, but he
switched
switched to
after the
linebacker.
first like 4 games. So he played edge because of depth, and then he switched to linebacker for Wisconsin and Michigan,
He was, and then his
and then
his
obviously the
like
incident.
position is linebacker. So
Yeah,
I think he
so
got a
it'll
lot of
be
his
interesting to
sacks
see
against
what that looks like.
Akron and who we played first game
Western,
Western.
Western,
He
that's
had a
right.
couple of forced fumbles. I think down. I think he had a pick against Wisconsin. Maybe a couple of fumbles, but he's an athlete. I mean, he's a ball hawk when it comes to making fumbles. And having him and Holiday, I mean, Holiday's a little stiff sometimes with zone coverage. I don't like our pass defense that much, anyways. But I think he is more athletic. I just don't know if we run a 4-2-5 or 4-3. But if we run a
Yeah,
four,
it should.
if we run a 4-3, I'd love to see Darius Snow. Such a good player. He got hurt last year, first game. He got hit by another teammate, Chester Kimbrough, and I thought it was a hip, but I guess it was a really bad knee injury. Um, Jordan Hall is a freshman from Florida that could be good, or from Virginia. And a guy we've had in the program for a long time is Ma'a Gatiote. His brother, I think, played at Ohio State. He's kind of been in the program. He almost transferred. So I don't know who our third linebacker would be. Maybe Aaron Brule from Mississippi State. But there is some depth there when it comes to linebacker. But the way I'm seeing it, that Holiday and Windman are definitely the 1 and 2.
Gotcha. Yeah, the last few years, I mean, since Tucker's been there in 2021, 2022, I mean, the front seven necessarily hasn't been the big issue. I mean, obviously depth has been,
Getting
but like
pressure
stopping the
consistently.
run is the yeah, the run stopping has been good, I would say, the last
Yeah.
3 years. It's really just been pass rush out of those guys and so adding some of those higher end pass rushers should help that group if anything. So I
Yes.
can do something similar. So our front seven is going to be, I think, really good. If I had to point to a weakness, it would be the edge position. But let me kind of talk through internally. You're going to have Mason Graham, who's a true sophomore. He started down the stretch last year as a true freshman in the Big Ten, um, as not the nose, but the three tech. Just outside of that, you're also going to have Chris Jenkins, and he's I think transitioning to playing more nose this year. It's just we had Mozzie Smith who played a lot of nose, and you didn't really need a true freshman going up in the middle. Most likely him. You have Chris Jenkins, whose nickname is the Mutant. He bumped up 20 pounds this year, so he was playing technically D end, right? Because it's a 3-4 defense with the nose and two D ends, but it's really a defensive tackle position because you're not really lining up wide a lot of the time. You're really lining up inside the tackles to kind of run stop. So Chris Jenkins, he might be that player. He's a senior. He was a lowly recruited guy. I think he was a low 3-star, but he's just an athletic freak. Like I said, the nickname is the mutant on the team. That's what the strength coach called him. Um, so Chris Jenkins is looking to take that step. Like I said, he added 20 pounds of play more interior, be more disruptive. And then you have Kenneth Brandt, who's also a true sophomore, played a lot down the stretch. He's in the 330 range, so a little bit bigger. I think Mason Graham's in the 315. Chris Jenkins is just over 300. You also have Rashawn Benny and Cam Good. This is going to be a strength of the team. They were good last year. They were really disruptive. Then moving to edge, this is the area of concern for this group, but I'm not super concerned because Michigan's going to bring pressure in a lot of different ways. People step up at the edge position consistently for this group since Harbaugh has been there. I'm not really worried of them finding someone. Mike Morris was an unknown commodity, had 9 sacks last year. The year before that, obviously, you had Hutch and Ojabo. The year before that was Pay. The year before that, I mean, they've had guys kind of consistently find it at the edge position, so I'm not super worried. But this group is made up of Braden McGregor, who's a Michigan kid. He had 2.5 sacks last year. Jalen Harrell was a starter. He started opposite Mike Morris. He's more of a run defender, if anything. He's looking to develop more of a pass rush. And then you have Josiah Stewart, who is a transfer from Coastal Carolina. He had 3.5 sacks last year, but he had over 10.5 tackles a loss, and he had 12.5 sacks as a freshman at Coastal. So this is maybe a guy that can be the difference maker. He's a little smaller, so I would assume he's going to be more in pass rushing downs being put on the field. But he's electric. He's a superb athlete. He's going to be the one who bends around corners and gets stacks for you. So I kind of put him as an or where Harrell was in a lot and really doesn't have that pass rush burst where they'll probably split a lot of reps. They just have two guys behind him or three guys behind him. Derek Moore played last year. I think he had 2.5 sacks as a true freshman. He's I think 6'4", 6'5". He can be one of those big, tall outside linebacker edge positions that can drop as well as rush the passer. And then Kayshawn Bennett, third year in the program, redshirt sophomore. He maybe can make a stride. But the group in the front seven that's going to dominate is the linebackers. In the same way that MSU strength is linebacking, Michigan strength is linebacking. You have Junior Colson, who's gunning to be a first day selection next year. He started since he was a true freshman. He's now a junior. He improved over the stretch last year, but he wasn't really engaging with blocks early on in the year and like destroying the hole. He's more just trying to find and fight. By the end of the year, he's doing a lot better. Michael Barrett, who's been in the program forever, I think he's a sixth-year senior. Um, he's a bit smaller. He did beef up, but he's going to be your passing down. He's a transfer when we had Don Brown in the program. He was the Viper position, which was like the linebacker safety hybrid that also kind of blitzed. He beefed up. And then we have Ernest Hausman, who was a transfer from Nebraska, who led Nebraska as a true freshman in tackles last year. He's going to be in that linebacking core. So you have three, I mean, bona fide starters in that group. You're going to see them rotate probably a lot. You also have this Jimmy Rolder fella who played last year as a true freshman. That group's going to be pretty good. I mean, their goal is to stop the run on early downs, shift out their big bulky run defensive group, put in right a pass rushing group, a coverage group in there, and that's how they play. It's a pro system. MSU took advantage of that 2 years ago in the Kenneth Rocker game with so many
Multiple
substitutions.
times we beat you guys because of that.
Yeah, and Jesse Minter, who's the coordinator who came from Vanderbilt. Everyone mocked him. He coached the top 10 defense last year when he actually had good players. Um, he did a better job of taking control of that. I think it happened one or two times, and it was against Indiana. But one of the cool things that he did last year is when Indiana made a quick substitution, they would make a really late substitution, not to where there's a delay of game, but to let the guys catch their breath. So that was really a point of emphasis in getting lined up and having less like, all right, just rush those guys in there. Oh, we had a third down pass rushing group. We need to immediately switch. It was more of let's see what the offense does and if they're changing and stuff. So that way that penalty didn't happen. Maybe like I said, it maybe happened once, but not really a huge factor. Especially with kind of the players Michigan has been able to develop under the system. It's their third going into their third year without having Don Brown, which means that we actually are getting D tackles that are big and not worrying about much as man. They ran zone 64% of the time last year, so a huge change from Don Brown's 90% of man blitzing scheme.
Definitely, I think it's been better since Don Brown left. Is he still coaching somewhere, like UMass or something?
I think he's at UMass.
I didn't. I just kind of threw that out there. But yeah, I don't like. I never heard any names you said, but obviously Michigan's defense is going to be stout and Michigan defense. So
Yeah,
obviously
yeah, yeah.
from
Yeah.
yeah. Go ahead.
They had a no star defense is kind of what it was quoted as
Yeah.
last year. So you didn't really have any electric players. I mean, Mike Morris was a big guy, and Mozzie Smith, Kentwood alum, East Kentwood alum. So shout
Yeah.
out GR. But he was a first round selection. So you are losing a first round selection, and hopefully these guys can kind of bolster that. But I'm not too worried about the front seven. I mean, Michigan,
Okay.
since Harbaugh's gotten there, hasn't had issues with their front seven, minus COVID year, but we're not even really counting that. So,
Yeah. So
so your secondary, man, you gotta let me
I'm
know
gonna split
because
this up to corner and safeties. I'm gonna split this one up
yeah,
because
because they've been
bad.
horrible
So
for
I'm gonna
since
put
Tucker got there.
yeah, it's been bad. And we used to no fly zone Trey Wayne, Darquez Denard, etc. I'm looking at the depth chart right now. 4 or 5. I mean, I think we have to step up. Having a guy like Chuck Brantley, he's kind of a legend for the Michigan sealing the Michigan game in
Michigan, yeah,
2021.
he almost he entered the portal,
He
right?
is really close with Keon Coleman, so that's why he might have transferred to. He's from Miami, so like I guess like playing the Miami game, he gets super nervous. And I tell you what, he's not a big guy. He is probably similar to me in stature, but maybe a couple inches taller and skinnier. But he hits like a truck. Truck is definitely our one corner. Um, I'm gonna say probably 4.5, between 4 and 5, because we could be really good, but I am totally worried because we get just shredded by teams that can throw the ball, like Ohio State. They're a terrible scheme matchup
Is
for
that like
us.
a scheme thing? Is
Definitely a
like
scheme.
because
Our scheme is like soft coverage, let them have the short passes. But obviously, it doesn't matter when we can't even defend the long passes. But the scheme is like let them get the short little 2 or 3 dink and dunks, and then hopefully we
and then in
can
the red
stop.
zone tighten up and
Yeah, bend don't break, which I can't really stand. I like personally if you have really good corners like Trey Waynes and Darquez, cover one. Obviously, that's not everybody's Trey Waynes or Darquez Denard in college. So Chuck's the number one for us. I think he's the leader. He's like a smaller guy, but he hits like a truck. And then on the other side, I think it'll be Terry Roberts. He is a transfer from Iowa. Iowa corners are always solid, so I think
they're
hopefully he's
fundamentally sound. And that's what I feel like MSU needs in that
yeah.
secondary.
And for some
Because
reason on
like you
this
guys,
step, go ahead.
oh well, it's like you guys play this like don't bend but don't break, but you guys let up 70-yard bombs to OSU every other week.
Yep, yep.
Minnesota couldn't. Every pass was 15 yards. I don't know how they did it. I
Tanner
watched like the
Morgan,
first quarter and a
not
half,
even a good
but
quarterback.
it was it was just 15 yards, 15
That
yards,
was the
15
most
yards,
demoralizing
run
game.
play, touchdown. It was so wild, and it's like I get
And they had
you
Mo
can't give
Ibrahim.
15 if you're giving five. Yeah,
And they had Mo
Mohamed
Ibrahim.
Ibrahim,
Uh,
he's on the Lions,
that
shout
was
out
my
Lions.
yeah, undrafted. I'll never forget. I think that was one of the few games I left early. And if you know me or my wife who's hidden in the background here, we don't leave early. But that was like 30-0. The team had no spark, no nothing, and Tanner Morgan was shredding us. Like there's something wrong with the scheme. Maybe guys were hurt, but everybody gets hurt. It's football. It sucks. But and what I was gonna say before you start talking was Chester Kimbrough is listed as our one on the other side of Chuck. In no way, he's a transfer from Florida. He's been with the team for 3 years now, but he's not like I respect college athletes to like utmost degree. I didn't play, but he's slow for a corner. So I think Terry Roberts will probably beat him out. He'll be our 1 and 2 with Chuck. He's from Iowa, fundamentally sound guy. Hopefully he just knows what he's doing, and I don't got to worry about him. But that's our corners. And since I'll just transition to safeties, and we both can break them down
Yeah,
since it's
yeah,
just secondary. Um, probably 4 or 5 2 for the safeties. Before I go there, behind Chuck is a kid from Wisconsin, also transfer. So, and then we have another kid that's been in the team for 3 or 4 years in Lowry. So I think there's some depth, but I'm not really sure how to feel about the corners. I think Chuck and the kid from Iowa, Terry Roberts, are got to be good. Just as simple for us to be a good team. Our front seven can only do so much for so long. Going to safeties now, I think Dylan Dylan Tatum and Mangum's brothers, the running back I talked about earlier, they're definitely our strong safety and our free safety. And then we got some guys that could be role players or something. One guy that I want to throw out there that could be super interesting to see if he plays at all is Harold Joyner, transfer from Auburn a couple years ago. He's a big dude. He's like 6'3", 6'4", playing safety. If he plays, he's going to light somebody up across the middle, and it might be nuts. So I just kind of want to throw him out there. I've seen him in some stuff in the camp here. But I think the young guys, Tatum and Jaden Mangum, are both sophomores. I think they're going to start. And I know one guy behind Mangum is a transfer as well. But those are definitely the guys. But I don't know. They haven't started. They're young. And like you said, our secondary has been Swiss cheese against teams that can throw the ball.
yeah.
I mean,
It is. It
Ohio
doesn't
State
even
puts
matter
up.
who's been back there.
No, it doesn't
It's just
matter. It's
anything, any scheme,
so bad.
whatever. They get yards.
And
I
even
mean,
when
Kid
we had
McNair threw for 329. Like,
even when we had X, I think he's somewhere in the league probably. Xavier Henderson, true Spartan dog to a T, good leader. But like he was playing safety for us against Ohio State last year, and he like stepped up 2 or 3 times, and got beat deep. And you know the measuring stick, we'll play Michigan hard every year. That's just the way it is. It doesn't matter if we're
yeah,
0-6 when we play them or whatever. We'll play Michigan close, 2 touchdowns at the most. Ohio State spanks us. When we had D'Antonio, it was close games because their defense was good. And maybe Ohio State was a little bit down. I don't know. But that's the measuring stick. We have to stop them. I don't want to watch another game when we get blown out by 35, 40 points and the game's over at halftime because that's been the last 2 years. Obviously, when we had Walker, he was hurt, so we couldn't really do anything. And then, yeah, it's tough. So, huge question mark. I think we have the athletes. They're good recruiting classes. Most of these guys are like Tatum and Mangum are Tucker's guys. So, um, huge question mark in the secondary as a whole, kind of the opposite of the front seven. So And we won't be tested until Michael Penix. And as a Michigan fan or Michigan State fan, Michael Penix has literally laid. He's like, "Hey, how are you?" Against when we played Indiana.
He's a friend of the program. He loves
When he was
playing
at
you guys.
Indiana, he's torched us, and they almost beat us. They could have beat us. It was like 38-31. And then last year, he torched us. Um, like he's got all day, and then obviously our secondary wasn't that good. So if our front seven gets some pressure and help out the guys in the back end, that'd be great. But they definitely got to step it up.
I love it. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see because I mean Scotty Hazelton, he shouldn't have a job. Like
Um,
if we're being because he's a DC, right? Like how
yeah,
can you
he's
be
a.
like last in passing defense 2 years in a row?
It's yeah, I agree. Shout
I
out
I, I
to
mean
Angelo Gross is our nickelback. He's a hard hitter. I gotta throw him out there. I think he was part of the tunnel thing too, but which
yeah,
sucks.
I mean
But Scotty,
yeah.
I don't know. He didn't fire anybody. He stuck with his guys. Tucker did. So I don't know. I was listening to Keith Nickel on one of the state podcasts. Grand Rapids legend. You gotta have 4 recruiting cycles before you can really judge a coach. Obviously, it's a little bit different for coordinators. I think if any coordinator on both sides of the ball struggles this year, they'll probably be gone. Um, but we'll see. I like Jay Johnson. I think coordinators overthink. And Scotty's got to figure it out because his spend don't break shit it isn't working. So
Well, you're breaking. Like you
it
can
breaks. Yeah.
run that, right? Like you can run that as a defensive strategy, but you can't run it if you're also breaking as much as
Yeah.
MSU's breaking.
Yeah. It
'Cause-
was bad.
But we'll talk about U of M. So splitting up cornerback and safety. We'll start with cornerback. I actually have this as a four, and so last year, I mean, Michigan lost two starting cornerbacks last year. DJ Turner drafted in the second or third round due to speed demon. He's a little slender, but he went to Cincinnati. They also lost Jamon Green. He was an undrafted free agent. I think he ended up with the Giants, but he was also a starting quarterback, and he got replaced on the stretch because he had a bad shoulder injury by this dog, Will Johnson, 5-star dude out of Detroit. Um, he had a knee scope in the offseason to kind of clean up some things. He had a toe injury that he was dealing with down the stretch too. But if he comes back healthy, he might be the best cornerback in the Big Ten. And as a true sophomore, like this kid is electric. He completely changed the Purdue and Michigan game. He had 2 picks. He covered up Marvin Harrison Jr. That was his assignment, and he did a really good job. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a touchdown reception on Jamon Green, not him. He is extremely long, athletic. He's only going to be getting stronger and faster this year. But the big question is who is the two? Who is the guy that's going to be playing outside on the other side? So Michigan runs a lot of nickel packages. They basically run at 4-2-5 with 2 to 3 safeties, depending on the situation, or a nickel. Mike Sainristil, he's an absolute dog. He came in as a cornerback, or came out of high school as a cornerback, went to the offensive side of the ball as a receiver because they needed him
Mm-hmm.
as a receiver. And he switched last year to play cornerback, which was his position. And he
He's
had a
way better. He's
hell
way better.
hell of a year.
Way better.
He had a hell of a year. He plays that nickel position. He's small. I think he's 5'10", maybe 5'11" if we're on a good day. But he fills in the run position. He blows up screens. He's super super aggressive. So also not worried about him, which is why I'm so high on this group. But it's the other outside position. So there's 2 guys that are really in competition, or 3 guys that are in competition for this. One of them is Josh Wallace. He was a transfer from I think UMass, so not really playing necessarily the best competition. He let up a really high passer rating, but I trust the secondary department to not pick up a scrub in the transfer portal. So I kind of have to have some faith in them. And then the other 2 guys are Jaden McBurrows. He's a redshirt sophomore or junior, so he's been in the program for a while, been through the defensive coordinator change. He dealt with some injuries last year, but hopefully he's back in the mix. He was a 4-star guy. And then Amarian Walker, he was a former wide receiver. He was a wide receiver last year and is transferring over to the defensive side of the ball. He's like 6'3" and a half, extremely long armed. He doesn't have any experience though. He didn't come in as a cornerback. He's transitioning to it. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that all works out. If he gets a lot of reps, if he's comfortable. I don't know exactly how fall camp is going for him, but if he goes, he was a freshman last year. I think he redshirted, so he's a redshirt freshman. So maybe not this year, but next year. him and Will Johnson might be like 6'2" plus corners that are long armed and really aggressive. So it's kind of a wait and see perspective on this cornerbacking room. And it's almost the exact opposite for the safeties. I almost put the safety group as our number one. So you have two guys who are absolute dogs, Makari Page and Rod Moore. Rod Moore replaced RJ Moten down the stretch as a starter. RJ Moten's now at Florida, expecting to start there. Um, these guys are incredible. They are effective in the run game. They break up passes. They have interceptions. They're really skilled. I think Rod Moore is expected to go possibly first round as a junior this year. So I'm extremely high on this group. They could really take it to the next level. You might see three safeties work. Michigan did it a bit last year. And the reason why Michigan does that is to help in the run game because Mike Sainristil, if he's in as the nickelbacker, he's smaller. But a lot of the safeties Michigan has been recruiting are in the 6'2" range, 6 foot range. And so you add them to the box instead of Mike Sainristil. Zeke Berry and Keon Saab are the two young guys that might work their way up in this. They're both high 4-star guys that have been recruited. And those are kind of two names to look out for. But this safety group in this secondary the sky could be the limit for this group. Like I said, they play a lot of zone. They're going to run man probably a little more this year, especially the Will Johnson side, but they're going to run zone. They're going to run a pro defense, and it'll be interesting to see what ends up coming out from this group.
When's Michigan first actually tested? Like, when's their first game?
Um,
Nebraska, maybe.
so defensively,
Yeah, on defense.
Nebraska.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, defensively, you're going to know Nebraska. Now, East Carolina almost beat NC State last
Yeah, I
year.
think low key that's a
So
scary game.
it yeah, it's a little scary. It's at night for Michigan. I'm not super concerned about it,
Is
obviously,
that night?
but yeah, I think
Oh,
so.
I see noon, but I could be wrong.
Oh, wait, no, you're right then. They do play a night game. I don't
Bowling
know who it
Green.
is.
Bowling Green.
Bowling Green, that's who it is. East Carolina, it's the first game of the year. I mean, Jim Harbaugh's unsuspended, so I'm completely not worried about that. East Carolina is a decent team. They're not like a walkover, but they're not a Power Five program. So I think the first time they're challenged is in that Nebraska game. Michigan, just to kind of, I don't know where we're gonna stretch if we're gonna end up jumping to special teams, which is
We
kind
will
of
quick.
it's
That won't be that
important.
long.
Yeah. But Michigan has struggled in Big Ten openers the last two seasons. They almost lost to Rutgers, which you guys probably didn't know about. They had to recover a fumble on a game-winning drive. Who they're playing again because it's Shiano's over there, right? Is that yeah?
Yeah.
He is a defensive marvel. Like if he could figure out how to coach the offensive side of the ball, Rutgers can win games because their defense is confident enough and they're tricky enough to mess up offenses. But they're on the field so much and they don't have the depth, so they get just steamrolled in the Big Ten. But Michigan almost lost to them, and last year they played a very close game with Maryland. It was by the third end of the third quarter. Michigan ended up going up two scores and one score, and then Michigan went up two scores. So it wasn't like any time that they had a chance to score to take the lead.
Mm.
But the last 2 years, it's been close, and so with these cupcakes, you're kind of concerned with maybe a new secondary and this stuff that it's going to be interesting kind of to see how that plays out. But we'll go to special teams. Sorry for
No, you're good.
that
We'll
little
do a
tangent.
little. We'll do a little schedule overview probably next time. So don't worry.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
talk definitely.
Sometime this week,
Yeah.
probably
Thursday.
Thursday,
Yeah.
right? We were planning
Thursday.
on that. Yeah.
Special teams. I just like I talked earlier. I probably have. Hmm, I put him as our one, but I don't really know if that he'll be consistent. So maybe a three. Tyrell Henry. He's our returner. I think Jaden Reed would be a one when he was our returner. He's electric. He took probably 4 or 5 back.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I remember we've who was it against? It was an away game. He took one back, and then the first punt back against Western Kentucky, he took it back too. Scary game. Western Kentucky's a sleeper good team. Bailey Zappi, shout out. But I think,
Especially on that secondary.
yeah, especially, and they were coming back towards the end. I can't remember who that was. The game before that, he took coming back, and then the first punt return back, he took it back. So it was back to back technically. That was pretty cool. But I think Tyrell Henry will be. He's kind of an athlete. I think he'll be solid. I don't know if he'll take anything to the house, but um, he'll be the guy for punt return, kick return. Hopefully, we get some good returns, and that always is huge. It's momentum. It gets a crowd into the game. I personally love a good punt return. If it's like if the bad coverage or something. There's a lot you can do if you want to like mess with the team. Have two guys in the back. We did it with Naylor and Reed. We'll see though. I'm not too sure. Our kicker, probably a 4 on this one. We had no kicker last year. I think we lost Indiana game because we had some guy bought like just missed a 20-yarder by a mile and we lost in overtime. I didn't go to that game because I didn't even feel like going. Didn't have a good feeling about it, and I guess I was right. Total bummer. But we got a transfer from North Carolina, Jonathan Kim. He's also he'll kick off as well. I guess he's got a boot, a lot of touchbacks. So all I'm asking for is a middle of the road kicker. Give me 50, 60, not percent, but ranked in the country. Hit what you got to hit. Hit everything within 40 yards in. Obviously miss a couple, but we're gonna have a lot of close games if our defense is good. I mean, Maryland could be a top 25 game. Washington's gonna be
He's
ranked.
going to be,
We're gonna have a lot
I
of
think, pretty
games that
damn
we
good.
need a. Yeah, I think so too. We're gonna have a lot of games where we need a kicker. I think we might be 8-4, 7-5. 8-4 might be high for a lot of people, but we need a kicker. It sounds like he's pretty solid. Um, know nothing about our punter, going from Bryce Behringer to him, so he's a 5. Bryce Behringer is just dropping nukes um,
Yeah.
for the Pats, like just bombs, like just changing the game. He literally was huge for us last year, and we were a bad team. He was literally like he would change,
He flipped the field a
flip
lot.
all the time.
Yeah,
He's really
like
good. Yeah,
your
he's
defense got breaks because like everyone's inside their own 20.
yeah
Like
he's a
your
good
offense
story.
didn't do anything, and they're inside their own 20.
He's a good story too. I think he went to Illinois, then he transferred here as a walk on, and then now he's in the NFL and he's a solid punter. I think he'll have a long career. But shout out number one, Hank Pepper. He's our long snapper. We had another Pepper a couple years ago. I think it was Tabor Pepper, no relation. I think he's a long snapper for the 49ers. But having a Pepper for some reason at long snapper is someone we have. And if you're good at your job, nobody knows your name. I think last year he was hurt for a little bit, so we had trouble with the snap part two. I think the guy couldn't help himself but say it again at the Michigan
Oh,
State game.
he had to.
He had to
Yeah.
do it, but I'm pretty sure Hank Pepper
Well,
was
it was
hurt.
like three straight bad snaps too. It was like high, high, and then it was sailed.
Yeah, it wasn't Hank Pepper. It was somebody else because he got hurt. I don't know how long snapper gets hurt because they just can't get touched in a game. So maybe he was in practice or something. But he's solid. He'll probably be in the NFL too. Um, Special teams can make or break you, honestly. So a lot of question marks last year. I think Els is our special teams coach, and a lot of people want him to go. Um, so fingers
So a
crossed that
lot
we
of
have a
question
kicker.
marks going into this year too with that special team. So because now
Obviously with the
you don't
transfer,
even have that punter.
yeah, we don't have Bryce Behringer, and Jaden Reed's gone. He's in the Packers. So
So
Tyrell Henry
yeah,
did
that's
some towards down the stretch, so he's comfortable. But the kicker and the punter, I think the kicker will be good, but obviously kicking last year was terrible, and then we had Bryce Behringer, so lots to improve on, for sure.
yeah. Special teams. I kind of rank them as a whole, but I can kind of go through them as you did. I like that. So we have Tommy Doman coming in. So he's replacing Brad Robbins, who got drafted as a punter from Cincinnati.
Hmm.
So that's a high level to replace. I guess I would probably put it at 4. Um, it depends on how you take fall camp talking points, but Tommy Doman was a high punting recruit, if you will. I mean, I know they don't get ranked, but he's well regarded. Harbaugh was like, yeah, this dude's got a nuke on his foot. So for kicking, this one is
Big shoes,
before we got the transfer, I would be like, I 5
big
because it was
shoes.
going to be
Jake Moody was
it was going to be
electric,
true
automatic.
freshman Adam Samaha. Yeah, Jake Moody, legend. Hope honestly, this might work in Michigan's favor, and I know it sounds kind of dumb, but a little tangent here. Michigan relied on Jake Moody so much because they knew anything from like 45 in was automatic that when they got into that area of the field, they didn't care if they had to score a touchdown. They're just like, okay, we'll just kick a field goal.
Yep.
Where maybe with a more inconsistent kicker, a less absolute dog, you might run into having to score touchdowns. We replace him with James Turner. He transferred from Louisville, I believe. Pretty well regarded kicker. I think he made like 86% of his kicks and had a few 50-yarders in there. So kind of getting a really really good guy. So I'd probably put that as a 3, where we know we're going to get a guy not going to be close to Jake Moody, but going to be pretty an average kicker. Um, on the kick return, punt return, we did lose AJ Henning, who did both of those duties. Roman Wilson is going to be the projected kick returner. I hope they change that. Too many things go wrong on kick returns regarding injuries, where the Wide receiver room doesn't have any depth. Throw a sophomore out there. I mean, Michigan hasn't had a dynamic kick return team in a long time, but let's not worry about it. Punt return is going to be Tyler Morris. They're projecting, who is the slot guy that JJ went to school with. Don't know how he's going to be. Uh, Hopefully, pretty good. I'd probably say that's a 5. Where I'm like, no idea, scared a little bit because he didn't field any last year. Overall, I'm not concerned about the group. Jay Harbaugh, which you can talk about, should he be given a job because of his dad? What's his pedigree? He coaches a damn good special teams group. Last year, Michigan had back-to-back weeks where the one was a really close to a block, and the next week was a block on the punt group. They were running the old pro style punt where you snap it and you have not the the wedge protectors wall in front of you. Within a week, he completely switched because he figured it wasn't working. They weren't getting the right blocks. Completely switched. No issues the rest of the year running the wall
It seems
formation.
like the punt formation that works best is like when you stagger guys like every few yards. That seems to be the best.
Yeah,
That's newer
and
the last few years, I think.
yeah, it's definitely a new, but he's willing to switch that, and I have
That's good.
no problems with him being the special teams coach. He's also the safeties coach and done a good job. Just kind of wanted to shout that out because the safeties and special teams have been incredible for Michigan over the course of the last few years. So, um, that I mean, I'm solid. I mean, Michigan is gonna have. I mean, I'm not gonna say they have national championship aspirations. Whether they're skilled enough to get there, whether they make the plays to get there, you don't know. But this group is solid. They don't have the 5 stars. They don't have the Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia. I mean, they don't have those rosters, but they develop guys. They get hot 4-star guys in. They get recruits that maybe some other teams overlook, and they develop the hell out of them. And that's why they back-to-back Big Ten champions, and that's why they're in the position to three-peat and are favored in a lot of polls to three-peat. ESPN projects Ohio State to be the number 1 team in the country, even though they're replacing a quarterback and all
Yep,
this
yep.
bullshit, which they have a high blue star chip rate, but you can only have so many receivers on the field, and they can only touch the ball so much. So, I mean, obviously they're going to be an incredible team, but it's going to be a really fun year in the Big Ten. I think Michigan State, as a Michigan fan, I'm going to say this. I think they shock some people. Um, I think if their quarterback can play. Now, if
Yep.
their quarterback plays bad, they could barely win any games. Their defense is going to keep them in games, but that offense is searching for something,
Hmm.
and they've only been good when Kenneth Walker ran for a bajillion yards and should have been a Heisman voter
Should have won.
or
Should have
Heisman
won.
contender, in my opinion.
I'm not
I don't know
I'm not
when running backs
biased.
don't win that. Running backs don't win that
He
award.
literally was. He
They're,
literally got
running backs
Mel
don't win
Tucker
that
$95
award,
million
but yeah.
dollars. Okay,
Yeah, I mean Mel Tucker owes Kenneth Walker some money, if we're
he
being
does. He
honest.
does.
And just a point. I know you said, well, you can't judge a coach before he's been 3 years in a
Keith
program
Nichols said it.
or 4 years. Yeah, 4 years. But they were willing to pay him after 2.
Yep.
So it's
Yeah.
a funny. It's like you can't pay someone 95 million and be like, whoa, whoa,
They can
whoa,
still
you
fire
need
him
to
2 years
wait.
later. It doesn't matter. You can still fire him.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what his
I
buyout
mean, it's
is.
just. Oh, I mean, as long as Ishbia is willing to pay it, right? With his new Izone, dude. Point of
Here we go.
also Michigan fans shitting on the Izzo
Who
football, like
cares?
fuck off.
Ishbia is a
Seriously, like
billionaire,
it is.
donates a shit ton of money to university. He says, "I want Izzo's name on it." Like he's like that important in my life.
Yeah, it's so
No, I'm just
irrelevant.
gonna say no. No, you're gonna say yeah, sure.
People just find shit to complain about on Twitter, and it's very
Twitter is
frustrating. But
toxic
it
or
should be a
X.
really fun. Um, I do have a question. If you What season, right, for Tucker, and maybe you have a question back, just what season for Tucker would you find unacceptable for win loss? Like not like, okay, it was a bad season, we had a few unlucky breaks. What's like
A bowl game
he should
is
be
the bottom line. Bottom line bowl
bowl
game.
game. So 6 and 6.
That's from D'Antonio. We were blessed from when I was in high school to now. I'm 29. I think his first year we didn't go to a bowl game with D'Antonio, and then we were pretty much consistent then on out. Yeah, I mean we're we we're a decent brand in college football now. the last 10, 15 years. If you don't make a bowl game, if you're not beating Indiana, you're not beating Maryland. Maryland will be good this year, but that's the team you got to beat.
and,
Rutgers, like those are three wins you should have every year, in my opinion, as a state.
and then
Obviously,
two out of conference, and then win
yeah,
one other one.
we will. Yeah, I think bowl game is a minimum. I think I'm high on the team. I'm thinking 8-4. That means we got to beat Washington and get maybe an upset here or there. And is it possible? Yes. Do we do that? But I really don't know. And we really don't know until we play Washington.
So if
And
he
that'll be
goes like
fun.
5-7, you're like
He'll be on the
this
hot
guy.
seat, 100%.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
And like 6-6 is like barely staying alive. You're still
COVID
gonna be
year, do we
pissed.
count anything? I don't know. 2-4, we beat Michigan.
No,
Uh,
I don't count COVID year. I
Then
mean, there
Kenneth
weren't even
Walker,
people in the
11 and
stands.
2, and our offense was Kenneth Walker. He was just the goat. I mean, he's a legend for a 1 year player. And then 5-7 with a terrible loss at home on homecoming to Indiana. A tunnel incident, is it really on a coach? Not really, but it just makes you look bad as a program.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a program blemish.
and then getting spanked by Ohio State, and then spanked by
Yeah,
Penn
like not
State.
even close.
Penn State's
That's the big thing
Penn
is
State spanked us too. So it's got to be a bowl game, and obviously I think for Michigan, it's got to be you got to be in the Big Ten championship game. But I think Penn State might be good. I think Drew Aller will be a really good quarterback. Who knows about Ohio State's quarterback? But I think when you expand to 12 teams in the playoff next year, and then a bigger conference, it'll be interesting to see how things work, and there won't be an East and a West anymore. So top two teams will play. I like geography and conferences. That's another conversation, I guess, to have another time. But this will be the last year, the East and the West, and a lot of weird shit's
thank
gonna
God
happen.
the West hasn't won it a single time. Like it's so
Not
preposterous.
once.
Not once.
What was leaders and legends? Wisconsin did.
Yep, when it was leaders and
Uh,
legends, Wisconsin did. They
beat State. That was
they
a hell of
curb
a game.
stomped Nebraska,
They beat
right?
State. The first year was against State when we beat them with the rocket play
Oh,
with the Hail Mary.
Wisconsin won it twice then
Yep.
because they curb stomped Nebraska and they had like 600 rushing yards.
Yeah, and then ours is I think 2010 or 2011 when we played them the first game. That Hail Mary we won, and then the second game. I mean, both games were just amazing, and then we had the punt return down to the 5 or something, and we got running into the kicker, so they got a first down. So yeah. So for me,
Yeah,
it's
I
got to
mean,
be a bowl game. But for Michigan, I mean, would you rather be like State, where you're like every 5 to 10 years you have a run, or would you rather be like Michigan, and if you don't make a playoff, if you don't win the Big Ten, obviously you guys have only won it 2 times since we've had the championship game. I mean, State hasn't
yeah,
much
I
either.
mean,
But like, what would you rather be 6-6
expectation.
or 11-1 and be upset and lose to Ohio State?
Um, I mean, I lived through the dark days. I mean, my whole entire childhood, like obviously when I was young, and we had Penny. I mean, my first experience is the App State game where I
Mm.
distinctly remember the football game. Um,
Was that Dave?
yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Dave.
Shout out, Mr.
and
Cycle.
yeah,
As
and
I always hand.
hi Jenna. And I was riding down to my aunt's house, and like we didn't even think to like watch it or listen to it, and then we heard like the final play happening on the radio. Like that's my Michigan fandom. Like for a long time, it was just misery,
John L.
and
Smith.
so
Don't talk to me about misery.
yeah,
All right.
well, yeah, but being in the age I am now, I'm okay with like if Michigan this year goes 11-1, right, and loses to Penn State, and Penn State loses to Ohio State, and Michigan beats Ohio State, and it's just like a tiebreaker. Like, would I be a little upset? Yeah, but going 12-0 back-to-back years is so incredibly hard that like I understand if they lose a game. But I think now that Michigan has kind of built, maybe you could say a foundation. Like if Michigan loses, it 10-2 is the baseline this year.
Exactly.
Like you, and it's not like Harbaugh's job is going to be like on the line again. I mean, he's done what no coach has done since Lloyd Carr, so you're not going to do anything about it. But just 10-2 is like the expectation on like a bad season, and like that means you lost to Penn State, close, Ohio State, close, right? Like that would be the only explanation.
Mm.
And talking about the 12-team playoff, I hope we get better out of conference scheduling where we get more games where we're playing maybe even 2 out of conference games that are against Power Five opponents, where we
You have
get more
Texas
people
next.
challenging.
Texas next year.
Hmm?
Do you start? Is it Texas?
Texas, then Oklahoma, then Oklahoma, then Texas.
And
The
then
Michigan hadn't scheduled or hadn't missed scheduling a Power Five in a non-conference since like 1908. So it was just they were supposed to play UCLA for 2 years. Michigan realized, hey, if we do this, how it's set up, we're gonna play 6 home games in this year. We'd only have 6 home games, and the money that 110,000 fan brings in versus paying out the contract made more sense. So they were like, we're not going to lose money by doing this deal. They tried to flip it so they could get 7-7, and UCLA didn't want to because it'd probably be screwed them on their end of
I mean
scheduling
their attendance is
because with
probably shit.
COVID,
Their attendance
everything
is.
got screwed up, and so it's just what it happens. It's not like it was planned to be this way. It was UCLA didn't have Power Five, and then Michigan backed out late enough that everyone already had teams and they couldn't schedule another Power Five. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's the same thing with like Georgia this year.
Their schedule.
Yeah, Georgia schedule is soft. I mean, the toughest team they play out of conference is Georgia Tech
Wow.
because they couldn't play Oklahoma back-to-back years because Oklahoma was supposed to be on their schedule next year, and the scheduling for SEC told them to cancel it. So, I mean, it's just the best teams win the best games, and is that's what that is. So, I'm
Yeah.
not too worried about it.
Yeah. So 10-2 at least for you guys is and for us it's a bowl game, and it sucks to say that because we used to be consistent
Ten
eight
and two
plus
was the
wins.
expectation
Yeah.
for a while. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, a little bit down. Did Antonio kind of have us in a bad spot when he left? Yeah, and he left late, and then COVID. So
He boned you guys.
and then
Just say it.
COVID. Yeah, he kind of screwed us
Antonio's a
over,
goof,
but like
but
I
he
can't be
boned you
mad at him.
guys.
Yeah, he definitely did with the roster, and then COVID hit for Tucker, so he should be
Well,
getting his
and he
guys in.
left late, so he got the extra $1 million or whatever it was.
Yeah, and then Tucker had like a month maybe of recruiting or 2 months, and then COVID
Right.
happened.
Yeah. I mean, he screwed you.
Yeah,
But this is gonna wrap it up. I think we're good. We're gonna preview the schedules next week, or well, later this week, if you will.
hmm
I'm excited. It'll be fun to kind of go through the games and the teams. And you have anything else to ask or say before we sign off for the first ever podcast?
no, go green.
Go blue.
Perfect, perfect way to end it. See ya.
All right. See you, Dave.